Welcome to the Chosson and Kallah Shmooze You Wish You Had But Never Got, Part 24. As I've been letting everybody know and asking you very kindly, the subject matter of these videos are highly sensitive and they require preparation and grounding, and so please look at all of these videos in their order from beginning to end. If you are looking at them on my YouTube channel, you'll be able to first Google my YouTube channel under my name, and then you can go to the playlist Chosson Shmooze, and they will follow one after another in linked order. The topic for today is going to be anorgasmia, which means inability to have an orgasm, and we're going to address it from the female perspective, because from the male perspective, yesterday's video discussed it in a different way, but essentially whatever we discussed in yesterday's video could apply. So again, if this doesn't pertain to you, or you find the discussion of these matters somehow offensive or disturbing, there's no need to watch this particular video. However, I feel once again that there's an importance to convey these matters with due modesty and due preparation, because there's unfortunately ignorance out there and misguidance. And so the issue itself of a female orgasm is a complicated one, because like many inner experiences, they're difficult to describe, and because in certain ways they're a bit more elusive than the male orgasm, some people are even confused or unclear what it is exactly they're experiencing. Because as we noted yesterday, if a man orgasms, although they don't necessarily always have to go hand in hand, frequently they do, which is that a man will have an orgasm and ejaculate. And also, especially men in their teens who have very strong desires, they can easily, without a lot of work, they can easily end up ejaculating. So the male orgasm is often less of a mystery. However, the female orgasm is a mystery. Now, clearly it exists. We already mentioned the Gemara Nida on Daf Lamed Aleph, on Daf 31. We mentioned that women do have orgasms, and it's actually a mitzvah for a husband to give his wife an orgasm. We mentioned that although the Gemara uses a lashon of a woman giving forth seed, that is just a description of either what popular medicine thought or even the rabbis themselves thought. That's an interesting discussion for itself. But clearly, if a man looks the way that he looks and he is giving forth seed, so when a woman reaches her climax and she looks the way she looks, we also assume that she's giving forth seed internally, externally. All these things are interesting questions, how the ancients viewed this, but it's unmistakable that the rabbis were referring to a female orgasm and that it's a mitzvah for a husband to help his wife have this. But because it can be a little more elusive and subtle, and some orgasms are very powerful and some orgasms are very subtle, women oftentimes mistake the pleasurable sensations of sexuality for orgasm, meaning men also experience pleasure during touch, during sexual contact, and that pleasure is a valid, important, excellent thing, but it is not a climax. It's not a release of sexual tension. One does not get the endorphin rush that they get from an orgasm. So when a woman is experiencing sexuality and experiencing sexual pleasure, that is not the same as an orgasm. It does not achieve the same physiological and emotional responses. An orgasm is going to be some kind of intense peak of pleasure where possibly there are spasmodic and rhythmic contractions within the body, as well as a sense afterwards of release. And that is universal. It may be subtle or it may be extreme, but that's universal. Another thing is that although it is harder for women to have orgasms as quickly as men, women can experience multiple orgasms, and oftentimes it only requires a few moments, a minute or so, or even less, for this refractory period, which means like a period when you don't feel a lot of desire, to start feeling the desire again, unlike men who they may not be able to orgasm for minutes afterwards, hours, or even a day or two. So people have different libidinal tendencies. However, this is an important point because if a man wants to please his wife, oftentimes she may feel much better with successive orgasms. Sometimes one after another brings more pleasure, and at first the woman might not even know herself that she's feeling more desire, because moments or a minute afterwards, even for women, there can be a refractory period. However, it's important to check in, say, a little bit later and see if touching feels good again. Now, for a person who never experienced an orgasm, it's going to be a challenge because it's not like you really could teach someone how to have one. Even other physical activities, like if you want to teach somebody how to ride a bicycle, you don't really teach them how to ride a bicycle. You kind of supervise them and keep them safe while they themselves figure out how to ride a bicycle. You might offer tips, but learning how to ride a bicycle is a physiological, mental experience, learning balance and coordination, etc., etc. Similarly, to learn how to have an orgasm is a physiological, mental, and emotional experience. And oftentimes, if a woman does not have orgasms, it makes a lot of sense for her to first learn how to give herself an orgasm before she can even guide her partner or learn how to guide the sexual experience for herself and for her husband in order to have an orgasm. And this is a key issue. And as I said in prior discussions, the halakhic value of this is clear, but at the same time, I cannot offer here either sex therapy or halakhic guidance on a video. This is up to you to hear what I'm offering you as educational information, something that you can learn and know about, and then figure out how you want to apply it. Just like a doctor tells you this is the best medicine, the doctor doesn't necessarily tell you whether the medicine is kosher or not. If you have a concern about whether or not these things are permitted, then that's important to discuss with a rabbi who truly understands the nature of your situation and also sexual halachic issues, because there's definitely a halachic problem with masturbation for the sake of masturbation. And even in females, although the prohibition of wasting seed is a machlokas poskim for females, but there certainly is a problem with masturbation just for the sake of masturbation. However, this is not masturbation for the sake of masturbation. This is masturbation for the sake of enhancing a relationship and enhancing the overall sexual and emotional health. So it is on a different level. However, if you're going to be too shy and not offer the rabbi real information about the challenges in your life and in your sex life, you're going to get some kind of general answer, and the answer will probably be no, because that's what happens when you ask general questions. So, this is an issue, and you have to decide what you want to do with that. I can't help you with that. I'm not your rabbi. But what I would say again is I'm here to offer education. So the most valuable thing that a woman could do if she is not having an orgasm is to first learn how to give that to herself, because it will be much harder with all the anxiety and tension and process of being involved with another person to learn how to do it spontaneously with your partner, with your spouse. Now, there are a number of techniques that people use. There are, first of all, certainly you need quiet. You don't need kids banging on your door. You need to be relaxed. You need to be mindful and learn how to experience your bodily sensations. A great exercise would be simply to lie back and, before you even begin anything sexual, to simply just touch your arms, your thighs, your stomach slowly, and just feel the experience. Just learn how to quietly notice those sensations. One can progress to what are considered erogenous zones, places where there is a more of a tendency toward sexual sensation, whether it's the lips or it's the nape of the neck or the breasts, and of course eventually into the genital area. Now, as was described in one of the earlier videos, the location of the place of highest sensitivity for sexual arousal in a woman is what's known as the clitoris, and there is some confusion about where it actually is. It is not inside the vagina, and actually the area in that pubic area, there are a number of things, so to speak, going on there. There are, so to speak, the lips, which is loose folds of flesh that cover the general area, and then within there are actually three, I guess, locations, you could say. There is the lowest area, which is the vagina, the entrance to the vagina, and none of this is obvious. It's within folds of skin, and then there's the urethra, which is where the urine comes out, which is a separate place than the vagina. Some people are surprised about that. They don't know that about their bodies. And then above that is an area where there is a lot of sensitivity and folds of flesh, and within those folds of flesh is a relatively small bony structure, but not hard bone like the cartilage on your ear. It's semi-soft, and it's about the size of maybe a pea. Now, this area, very similar to the man's sexual organ, when there's sufficient sexual arousal, it actually gets stiffer and more erect. But since it's much smaller, it's not as noticeable. And there's something else very interesting about that area, which is that touch over there can feel invasive and painful when you're not fully aroused. So even if a woman is experimenting in trying to masturbate herself, which, as we've noted, can be very productive for the right reasons, at first she may need to relax, may need to touch herself in other areas and begin to feel more emotionally open to the process. Also, just like with regular sexuality, lubrication is extremely important because it transmits touch and sensation very differently, and it also doesn't irritate or ruin the area. So I'm going to kind of show a picture of something, not a real picture, but to help you visualize better what we're talking about. And again, please understand here, we're dealing with things that relate to Torah and mitzvahs. This is a part of the mitzvah of Ona, that a man should know how to please his wife, and it's going to be very hard for him to do that if she doesn't know herself, her sexual matters. So this is a private thing that should really not be broadcast, and it really shouldn't be on YouTube, except there's a lot worse things on YouTube, and we've got to do it. So forgive me for being very graphic, but if you will look at my hand here, you can imagine that this is the vaginal area, and you can imagine, let's say, that over here are the folds of skin. So this is, let's say, the top of the body. This is the stomach and the head. Right in the beginning of the fold, right here, is where you may see a little flesh, like kind of pinched, and then within there would be the clitoris, would be this little bony area that, when it's rubbed, it's like the tip of the male organ, and it could feel extremely pleasurable. Now, people respond to various kinds of touch differently. Some people need fast, some people need slow, some people need circular. There are all kinds of things. There also are, if a person's having difficulty reaching orgasm, and it takes patience and relaxation. And in a way, it could be scary if you've never had it before, because there is a part of the orgasm where a person, in a certain sense, loses control and almost loses consciousness. The French, who are very astute in the art of making love, the French word for the female orgasm is petite mort, little death. And it's a true observation. So as a person is getting more aroused, they might become frightened and distract and pull away. And here we're not even talking about people that have experienced sexual trauma or other things that can make this far more complicated and take much more work and probably professional help to resolve. But there are, so to speak, tools. One can purchase vibrators of all sorts that rub and vibrate against that area that can produce extremely intense sensations. And especially for people who've never had orgasms, they can be very helpful. Not all vibrators are alike. There are kinds that are very intense and powerful, and others that are more subtle, and it may require experimentation. There also are a new class which use a very different mechanism, almost like a blowing action. And there are some women who find that experience when they use those types of stimulators to be extremely and intensely pleasurable. And for someone, again, who's having difficulty reaching orgasm, these tools are very important and might be very helpful at first to be used on one's own to learn about their body, and then eventually to teach their husband how to make them feel good too. Some people might feel that this is silly, it's a waste of time, it's degrading. Some people might feel like it should happen, quote, naturally, close quote. And, to that, I ask you to consider what really happens naturally. I mean, do we learn how to read naturally? Do we learn how to ride a bicycle naturally? When we need glasses, somehow or another, does our vision get corrected naturally? It's a complete illusion. It's nonsense. Many, many things need to be learned. When it comes to sexuality, it takes time and it takes patience, and it's not always, quote, natural. It's ideal that eventually it happens with a minimum of effort and a minimum of tension and focus, and that really will come because behaviors become reciprocal. So maybe at first a woman requires a lot of focus, a lot of concentration, maybe vibrators and different devices to achieve an orgasm, but once they learn about their body and learn their sensations, in time they might be able to have orgasms just by being touched by their husband, just by being rubbed, and possibly even eventually just through intercourse alone. But all those things take time and take patience. And people sometimes, especially people with concerns about self-esteem and inappropriate shame, right? Shame is a wonderful midah. It's one of the midahs that is praised by the Gemara as sterling attributes of Jewish people, modesty and shame. Those are wonderful things, but not misappropriately placed. I stress again that this is an important part of marriage, an important part of shalom bayis, and so shame and distress and feeling impatience, or feeling that you're not supposed to do this, or feeling that your pleasure is not important. All those things, those are destructive, non-helpful ideas. Even if one were such a big tzaddik or tzaddikis that they felt that their own pleasure is not important, and the only thing that's important is their spouse's pleasure, should somebody actually delude themselves into thinking that they're on such a madrega, I offer the following thought. How pleasant would it be to take somebody out to a fancy restaurant for their birthday or anniversary, and the other person who you're treating, they order this amazing, steak and a glass of expensive wine, and then the person asks, what would you like to eat? And you say, I'm not hungry. I'll just watch you eat. I mean, how good does that feel? The best joy is shared. The best sexual pleasure is shared. So if you're really so holy that you have difficulty allowing yourself to have pleasure, then tell yourself you're doing it for your spouse. Tell yourself you're doing it so your spouse will have more pleasure and feel more confident seeing that you can have pleasure.